As we resume our afternoon session, let's dive into the Johor and Singapore Special Economic Zone, Reigniting Growth in the South. Welcoming our panelists, Yang Bahagia, Datuk Dr. Badrul Hisham bin Kasim, the Chief Executive of Iskandar Regional Development Authority, and Dr. Ong Kian Ming, the Policy Commentator and Professor of Taylor's University, and the moderator, Mr. Khairy Jamaluddin, Malaysian politician, radio presenter, and podcaster.
Welcome to a special edition of Keluar Sekejap, powered by CGS. We have an exciting panel this afternoon, and we will delve into not just the economics of the southern region, but also, crucially, the geopolitics that surrounds a very exciting transitionary period in Johor, as well as Malaysia. And I'm happy to introduce two eminent individuals, well-placed to discuss not just the relationship between Malaysia and Singapore, but also the future of Iskandar, Malaysia, the future of the Special Economic Zone that has been announced recently, and also the opportunities that will come from the SEZ. Legend has it, sometime in 2004, the then Malaysian Prime Minister, Datuk Sri Abdullah Ahmad Badawi, now Tun Abdullah Badawi, was standing on a vantage point somewhere in Hong Kong, where he could look across and see Shenzhen. And he turned to one of his aides and said, "You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of an exciting possibility where there is a metropolis so closely located to another area which can grow off the success of that city." And the aide asked him, "Where would that be, sir?" And he said, "Johor, because you have Singapore right next door. And the opportunities that that presents in terms of arbitrage, in terms of expansion, and in terms of connectivity would be something that could create in the former Prime Minister's mind Shenzhen, as it would be to Hong Kong, and now Iskandar, as it would be to Singapore." 2006, Iskandar was officially launched, and it became one of the several economic corridors, and I would argue, despite setbacks and also despite perhaps not fulfilling its ultimate potential, the most successful corridor out of the special economic corridors that were set up. Now that's about to leap forward into a new age with the announcement of the Special Economic Zone. To make sense of this, I'm delighted to be joined by Datuk Dr. Badrul Hisham bin Kasim, who is the Chief Executive of Iskandar Regional Development Authority, or IRDA. And one interesting fact that I wanted to let you know about Datuk Badrul is that he is the first Johor Administrative Officer to be appointed as the Chief Executive of IRDA. The initial CEOs of IRDA came from the private sector, and then the immediate predecessor of Datuk Badrul was a federal civil service officer, and Datuk Badrul was appointed having served as the Deputy State Secretary of Johor. And this is significant because, to me at least, it signals a shift of the driving force of Iskandar, or IRDA, from not just the federal government, but now a complete buy-in operationally by the state government, and perhaps that can also smoothen and streamline a lot more of the ambitions of IRDA. Joining Datuk Badrul on the panel is Dr. Ong Kian Ming, former Deputy Minister of International Trade and Industry, Professor at Taylor's University, and Hacker-in-Chief of PADU, or the Central Database that the government just launched on the 2nd of January. Kian Meng has been very busy finding loopholes in the architecture of Padu. Without further ado, I'm going to give both panelists 10 minutes to do their corporate spiel before we get into a bit of keluar sekejap grilling for me to ask the tough questions that you expect of me today. So I'm going to give the honor to Datuk Dr. Badrul Hisham Kasim, Chief Executive of Iskandar Regional Development Authority. Datuk, the title ostensibly, this is a fireside chat, the Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone, Reigniting Growth in the South. Maybe, Datuk, you could explain to us why is this different, what you expect from this, and what are the priorities of IRDA for the next year. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me today, Tan Sri, Datuk Tuan-Tuan Puan-Puan sekalian. You mentioned earlier about how back in 2004 there was this vision on Shenzhen, Hong Kong development and so on. And it happened quite quickly at the time when we, in 2005, we have this study being done by Khazanah on the South Johor Economic Region. It hasn't got a name yet at the time. Although I'm Chief Executive, I'm quite new as a Chief Executive, only 2 years, but back in 2005, I was seconded to Khazanah to do the study together with the previous Chief Executive, Dato' Ismail. So our history went back then on how we foresee Iskandar Malaysia should be. And after that, I went back to the state. I was in the economic planning unit of the state, and there was a link, I suppose. My role at the time was to make sure that what's being done in Iskandar Malaysia, whatever approvals required from the state, land matters, local authority and so on, we have to go through facilitation. And I think that's how we started and how we manage Iskandar Malaysia and the relationship between the federal government and state government. And of course, as we go along, a lot more now is on the implementation. Earlier it was more the visioning, on the planning role, but now it's gone into the actual development and facilitation of the investors. Of course, when we first started, the new development was in the western part of Johor, Johor Bahru, what we call Medini. You're probably aware of where Medini is. And because of that, there's a lot of misconception. When you talk about Iskandar Malaysia, you think of Medini, not necessarily the whole of Iskandar Malaysia, which consists of Johor Bahru, Kulai in the north, and part of Pontian in the west. So at the time, we received a lot of remarks like when people come and see me and they said, later on after lunch we're going to Iskandar Malaysia. I said, you are already in Iskandar Malaysia, because what they meant was they're going to Medini area. So as we develop, I think now what we've seen is that the development has gone further. Of course, that was the greenfield that was developing, but there are also new development in Pasir Gudang, the east, and earlier this morning we were talking about data centers, and a lot of that is in the north, in Kulai, in Sedenak, and there's a lot of relationship that we've had with Singapore from the start. From 2007, we set up the Joint Ministerial Committee. Initially, more government-related matters such as immigration, transportation, tourism, and so on. But after that, we moved on into iconic project, the project between Khazanah and Temasek. And then after that, even after that, we go into innovations, digital startups, and also industrial cooperation. So now we have gone further. We take this further, so we're not actually starting from scratch, but we are taking this further from the normal joint venture between two business entities in Iskandar Malaysia, but we take it further by having the more coordinated government effort to have this special economic zone.
Dato', in October of last year, during the leaders' retreat between Malaysia and Singapore, both the Prime Ministers, Prime Minister Dato' Sri Anwar as well as Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, reiterated the importance of the SEZ as this new engine or catalyst for developing Iskandar as well as Malaysia-Singapore bilateral relations. I'm told that sometime in the next couple of weeks, the first memorandum of understanding will be signed between Malaysia and Singapore about the special economic zone. And I know that you can't preempt, obviously, the details of the MOU, but there's been a lot of speculation. Is the SEZ geographically defined already? Because some people said it's only going to be in Forest City. The incentives are going to be only for those who set up in Forest City, or is it possible that the SEZ and the incentives that come with it are extended to a much bigger geographical area in southern Johor?
A simple answer is no, it's not yet determined. What we've done is before the October leaders retreat, we had the joint ministerial committee between Singapore and Malaysia on Iskandar, Malaysia, back in July. So we had that. That was when the idea of special economic zone was mooted. That was brought to the leaders retreat within the two prime ministers in October. And now we're going to sign next week the memorandum of understanding, which we hope we will be able to sign a definitive agreement within a year, hopefully. So sometime this year, perhaps towards the end of the year, we hope to have all the parameters set, including the locations of special economic zone. It could be the whole of Iskandar, Malaysia, or it could be a specific bonded area.
So that's subject to negotiation?
That's right. That's subject to our study and also on the discussion with Singapore.
Dr. Ong Kian Meng, you've written a very widely shared piece on the SEZ. You provided 10 suggestions as to how the SEZ can be a game changer. Maybe I wanted to start by asking you about your thoughts on Iskandar up to now. Has it been a success of sorts? And maybe you can give us a summary on some of the 10 points that you mentioned, including connectivity, using Iskandar as a test bed for technology, greater collaboration in R&D and in higher education.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Khairy. Thanks, Dr. Badrul. Thanks also to CGS-CIMB for inviting me here. I thought I'll preempt Chinese New Year and also the Dragon theme by wearing a bit of red today. Bring a little bit of luck and energy. And probably, before I start, I probably would speculate that the young aide that was with Pak La in Hong Kong went on to become the Member of Parliament for Rembau, and then also... But I think the good thing about that vision is the fact that Shenzhen's economy now is actually larger than Hong Kong's. And I think that's something that definitely Johor should aspire to. And also to add on to one other transition point, it's not just transitioning in terms of the Agong in Malaysia, but also an important year for Singapore as they transition to a new Prime Minister with elections that will be presumably led by the Prime Minister designate Lawrence Wong. So there will be pressure, I think, on Singapore's side for them to deliver something substantive, which is why the SEZ becomes very important. With regards to IRDA, I was probably one of the few opposition MPs back then that actually bothered to look at the master plan. And it was a good master plan because you had different economic zones, entertainment zone where the Legoland was, Pinewood Studios, and then also the education zone, and then the development zone. But of course, I think I probably can say it easier than Dato' Badrul. The fact that there were large, physical developments, property developments there definitely threw the whole Iskandar project a little bit out of whack. In fact, a lot out of whack. But I think the underlying potential is still there. And I would like to highlight 3 areas as a summary of my 10-point article that was published in The Age and other places in this way. We need to have better physical connectivity with Singapore. We need to have better digital connectivity with Singapore, and we need to have better people-to-people connectivity with Singapore. So some of the highlights. In terms of physical connectivity, we know RTS is coming out 2026, but there are also other ways in which we can increase that physical connectivity. So the Deputy Minister for MITI and also Member of Parliament for Iskandar Putri, Liu Chin Tong, has suggested and written about possible ferry connections between Putri Harbour, which is an important area in Irda, and also Tuas, where there is already a Raffles Marina there. There's also a possibility of connecting Pasir Gudang, one of the marinas there, with a marina that's close to Changi, as part and parcel of a larger development project for Singapore in the Changi area, southern part, and also parts of Pasir Gudang that are currently underdeveloped. And there's also the talk of a possible third link that would ease congestion, because even now, Tuas and also the first link is quite congested. And I threw in an idea that, a property developer, spoke to me and other people about, a possible cable car connectivity near the RTS to Singapore at the Woodlands Point, which would also be a tourist attraction. So these are the ideas in terms of physical connectivity. When I talk about digital connectivity, what do I mean? A lot of our digital talents have gone to Singapore because that's where the startup, entrepreneurial, and also good jobs are located at. Why not bring back some of those jobs by using Johor Bahru as a sandbox as a service? That's what I call SaaS in terms of Johor Bahru. It's not software as a service, but sandbox as a service where different apps and also other digital services can be piloted or expanded in their scope in Johor. Because Singapore is a small market, it doesn't have the kind of diversity in terms of language, people, demographics as what you have in Johor Bahru. And that can actually be expanded into very niche areas that we haven't really discussed about, which I brought up in the article. Why not use Johor Bahru, Iskandar specifically, and Singapore as a test case for autonomous vehicle testing for right-hand car markets? Because right now, Tesla is doing it in the United States, left-hand drive. When you're talking about all the Chinese companies, they're doing it left-hand drive in the China market. Why not bring some of these testing capacities and also test beds to Singapore and Johor? And the good thing about Singapore and Johor is, if let's say it can work in a system like Johor, it should be able to go and do the kind of AV testing at level 2 and level 3 in Singapore as well. And this will be the first kind of cross-border AV testing. That's part and parcel of the digital connectivity. And the third part, the people-to-people connectivity, even though there's a lot of travel between the two countries, between Singapore and Johor, I think from an economic and strategic connectivity part, this has not been enhanced. So, something that Khairy and I like to do, we like to exercise, run. Khairy is a triathlete. Why not do a triathlon or a sporting tour that involves Singapore and different destinations in Johor and make that into an international event that is of world-class standard? And that will pull in a lot of tourists. One more example, Taylor Swift has 6 concerts in Singapore. Malaysia has 0. Why not have a deal with the Singapore Tourism Board whereby, maybe not Taylor Swift, but future acts, 4 in Singapore, 2 in the JDT Stadium, which I'm sure Khairy would be interested in trying to propose. And that can bring in people-to-people interactions and also activities between both countries in a very, very specific way. And the last point with regards to people-to-people is expand the kind of education exchanges, connectivity, and R&D in the research area between academics in Malaysia and Singapore. So that's just a gist of it.
Thanks, Kian Meng. One thing that I always add to Kian Meng's 10 points is a dream that I have had, which is actually to make the border, at least the land border between Malaysia and Singapore, a soft border. Basically have a similar arrangement like the Schengen countries in EU, in Europe, where there's no passport check. And I think with the development of digital IDs on both sides, it's much more realistic and feasible to have that soon. Imagine not having to do passport immigration checks at the causeway or at the second link or the third link. And I think that will be a huge game changer. I'm going to stick to Kian Meng and move the discussion a little bit on geopolitics and spice things up a little bit. Kian Meng, how significant is the extension of Sultan Ibrahim, the Sultan of Johor, as the Agong? for Iskandar and for the Special Economic Zone. And I ask you this as a former member of the administration and someone who advises the current government in some areas. Does this have a material impact on projects, on budgets being channeled more to the home state of the reigning monarch?
I think the short answer to that question is yes. Definitely, there's a lot of interest, both domestic as well as international, on Johor and Johor-related projects. Of course, the biggest project that we need to discuss would be the HSR. Maybe we can save that for later. But there are also other projects that we see mushrooming in Johor. So one example would be the data center project that was announced by YTL, where NVIDIA is going to support with their high-end generative AI chips. And I think there's a lot of data center investments that are being channeled to Johor, partly because of proximity to Singapore, partly because people know that there's a lot of business to be done in Johor. And I think the degree of interaction between the business community and also politicians with the Sultan of Johor is very, very frequent, and in fact has taken on a whole new level. And I think that kind of discussions would even accelerate after Sultan Ibrahim becomes Agong. And I think the key is Sultan Ibrahim is a businessman. Let's see what kind of value-added business deals can be put on the table for the betterment of Johor and Malaysia and also Singapore.
Dato' Badrul, don't worry, I'm not going to ask you that question. In this room, we're full of analysts and people who trade and people who advise their clients on what to trade. I want to talk sectoral opportunities in Johor. Talk us through two in particular that I wanted to ask about. One is property. What's the property sector like now? Have prices gone beyond what you've expected, or has it cooled down? And secondly, tell us a little bit about renewable energy. This is an exciting opportunity that has been presented with a cabinet decision to lift the restrictions on the export of RE. So a lot of talk has been about building up and planting up RE facilities in Johor and exporting that to Singapore and to other countries. Take us through some of the opportunities.
First, your question on the property sector. I'd like to be clear that property is not one of the promoted sector within Iskandar Malaysia by IRDA. We have our promoted sectors: manufacturing, tourism, medical, and so on. Property is not one of them. But we recognize that in order to get all those sectors in, we need to have a certain standard of living. Even when we first started almost 20 years ago, that's when I think Iskandar Investment at the time, under Khazanah, came in and developed Medini, which is seen as a property development, but very much so, what it did was to make sure that we have the facilities and for investment to come in. I remember the time when Johor managed to bring in investment from overseas. They open up their facilities, they open up their factories, but the expats do not want to live there. They prefer to live in Singapore because that's where the international school is. That's where they bring their family, their spouses would prefer to live in Singapore and so on. That has changed. So that's what the property development has contributed to Iskandar Malaysia. So now it's the other way around. A lot of people who work in Singapore would rather stay in Johor if they can travel outside the peak zones, the peak period. So I think with the development of the RTS, the attention on the property now is more towards the city center. It used to be when Iskandar Malaysia first started and towards the west. Now it's more on the city center, which is a good thing because JB, as you know it, the Johor Bahru City Center was quite run down for a while. The government has invested in the cleaning of the Sungai Segit, the famous Sungai Segit, And what we want now is to make sure that the right investment coming in, and then the property will also come up from there. And for other sectors, we'll continue to promote the medical healthcare, medical devices, of course, data center. A lot of investment in data center comes in as well. So all that we will continue to promote.
Do you want to add something, Kemeng?
Just like to add a couple of short points. I think two things with regard. The first one is regards to property. Given the abundance of land, especially plantation land in Johor, one thing that I would really want to push for is to have a new kind of master plan mixed development, whereby you set aside a certain amount of property, not just for residential, not just for commercial, but for industrial development. And I think industrial estates is something that is very hot now in Malaysia. Definitely in Johor, there will be one. And also set up, space within that big plantation land for renewable energy. Because right now, a lot of industrial estates do not have the same kind of land space to have that kind of RE space for, let's say, your solar farms, for example. That's one. Then the second part with regards to RE, Malaysia needs to get our policy right in the sense of exporting energy to Singapore. We need to get the single buyer infrastructure right so that whoever wants to make bids to sell to Singapore, it can be coordinated at the Ministry of Energy level, and it would be an entity that would not be owned by Tenaga, but by some other kind of shareholder agreement.
And the new development area, if I can also add, in Iskandar, Malaysia, is the north, the Kulai Sadana area where most data center comes in. And that's a huge land banks owned by Jacob, even by federal entities, which is currently palm oil, oil palm in the area. So there's a huge chance there for the mixed development, not just for data center, not just for industrial land, but also for mixed development, a new township. And also, I do agree with you on the renewable energy and the policy by the federal government on that, which I think on the Johor side, even as far back as 2-3 years ago, there's this plan on renewable energy, but it was stopped because of the policy. But now, because of the change, hopefully that will can continue now.
Let's talk about another sector that I think a lot of people in the room want to hear about, which is transport and construction. And that comes to iconic projects. One, as a frequent visitor to Johor, as a board member of the most successful football team in Malaysia right now, JDT, I frequently have to endure the traffic jams in Greater Johor Bahru, which I think is probably worse than in the Klang Valley. And one way of alleviating that, of course, is to have a better infrastructure for public transport. We have heard that it could be a BRT, it could be a LRT. What's going on there, Dato'? And what is the time frame for this?
Our initial plan was the allocations that we've got from the federal government is for the BRT. Initially, we wanted that to be in tandem with the RTS, but there's this request for us to relook on the whole transportation plan for Iskandar, Malaysia, for Johor, and to make sure that we provide the proper long-term plan for transport. That is where the feasibility of whether it's LRT or any other kind of transportation comes in. So there's a bit of delay on that, but of course, we are trying to make sure that it will be a holistic solution for transport.
Obviously, an LRT system, light rapid transit system, would be more costly than a bus rapid transit system or the BRT. Are you hopeful that there will be allocation, presumably from the federal government, for this?
Again, I have to look back into history. When we first started Iskandar, Malaysia, it was seen as a national project. And there's a sharp increase in the allocation that we've got for the Rancangan Malaysia, Peruntukan Rancangan Malaysia. So if we look at the other development, we know right now we've got RTS coming in, we've got the double tracking almost completing to JB, and with the public transport for Iskandar, Malaysia, and so on. If it is seen as a national project, then hopefully we'll get more funding from the federal government.
Ken Meng, in 2026, the RTS will be operational. For those of you who are not familiar with the RTS, it essentially links up JB with Singapore and the Singapore MRT system, and it makes for cross-border transport and connectivity much easier. Ken Meng, how important is it for us to also see the reapproval of the high-speed rail link? I think a lot of people still think that as not just a game changer, but as a no-brainer. There should be a high-speed rail link between Kuala Lumpur and Singapore that goes through much of Johor.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I would start this by sharing an experience I had with in Taipei recently, whereby I went on the high-speed rail from Taipei to Taichung and then to Tainan. And of course, the high-speed rail all the way to Kaohsiung in Taiwan has had its shares of challenges. But what I realized when traveling on the high-speed rail is that they actually have a parallel track that is a slower track. So similar to, let's say, if we are going to have a high-speed rail from KL to Singapore, there will also be the double track that goes from KL to Gemas and then to JB. And that model seems to have worked, but only with a proviso, which is that the high-speed rail must also lead to spillover and positive development along key stations and key cities along that route. So Taichung overtook Kaohsiung as the second largest city in Taiwan, and is a bustling metropolis now, partly because it's feasible now to actually travel from Taichung to work in Taipei. And I think we need to have a model whereby development takes place in a way that's strategic in places like Muar, in places like Batu Pahat, Pago, places that are currently underdeveloped, all the way up to Iskandar and also to JB. With the caveat that when these developments take place, the federal government must have some level of upside in terms of monetization. It cannot all go to the private developers or private entities, even though I know some of the companies may be covered by some of the analysts here in the room. And also some of the upside must be enjoyed by the state government as well. So that kind of property sort of like enhancement in value, which is something that's quite common in Hong Kong for the development of the NPR, should be something that's replicated with the high-speed rail. And I just want to throw in one additional point. The Sultan did say he wants the high-speed rail to go through Forest City.
Forest City.
If let's say that alignment does not work for different reasons, approval from Singapore and things like that, there's another alternative, which is to extend the RTS along the coast where there's a lot of undeveloped land, all the way to Iskandar, as well as connection to SEZ, and that connection to the Forest City, and that's where you get your connection from Forest City to Singapore, not by high-speed rail, but by the RTS and the MRT.
But that could also be part of an LRT if it's later.
Yes, and also the same development, maybe not everything needs to be come up, the money, not everything needs to be borne by the federal government. There may be upside in terms of land value along that path that can be enjoyed by both federal as well as state governments.
Ken Meng, although Dato' Badrul doesn't want to preempt the MOU that will be announced in the next couple of weeks, you were Deputy Minister at MITI, and under MITI you have MIDA, which handles the investment promotion activities and incentives. What special incentive do you want to see in the SEZ beyond what we normally give, pioneer status, 10 years, tax-free allowance and all of that? What more can we give? Or will we make the same mistake all over again by providing a lot of incentives and not generating enough value for the local domestic economy?
Great question. I'm also a board member of MIDA. I was appointed in August, so this is something that I think about very often. I think the time for those kind of zero tax for 10, 15 years, those days are, I think, getting numbered because of the implementation of the global minimum tax and the top-up tax. So where MIDA and also other federal agencies and state agencies can work together with is in the area of incentives for talent development. So in the area of AI, in Singapore's AI 2.0 plan, this was announced by Finance Minister and Prime Minister designate Lawrence Wong a couple of months back at the FinTech gathering in Singapore. Singapore plans to hire and train 15,000 AI talents. I don't think that kind of talent can be developed in Singapore alone. And that's where Malaysia and Johor has to play a role. And this is where the different players in the ecosystem, not just MIDA, but Talent Corp, J Corp, JLand, others who want to build that kind of talent ecosystem, including the educational institutions, UTM, and also the private education institutions in IRDA, can play a role to actually supercharge this SEZ by playing in a space where everyone in the world is looking at big data and AI.
So are you also talking about more liberal immigration requirements for people who want to relocate and work in Iskandar?
That includes perhaps giving special work visas to digital natives who want to work and live in Iskandar and maybe even have some sort of a role in Singapore, but they don't have to have a company in Malaysia employing them. They can be working for Google, headquartered in US, but because of the employment contract, we give them that visa, you can stay in Iskandar. And also, I welcome the recent policy announcement in the budget last year that students from in certain critical sectors
can stay on.
And foreign students can stay on, and they can be part and parcel of this talent ecosystem as well.
Dato' Badrul, in this opportunity of trying to get Singaporean companies or companies based in Singapore to move to Iskandar, and even to get companies who want to de-risk from China to come to Iskandar, talent is obviously a big challenge that we have in Malaysia. One of Kian Meng's ideas in his 10-point essay was also to look at areas like the care economy. He mentioned AI just now, but the care economy where we just need more workers who are able to look after an aging population, not just in Malaysia, but those from Singapore as well. Although, as Kian Meng said, we don't want to be a dumping ground for Singaporeans to send their parents here. What are the strategies to enhance talent development beyond immigration into Iskandar, beyond giving more employment passes?
The immigration part is quite important, I think, because if we can get the seamlessness between Malaysia and Singapore for people to come in and depending on their visa status, so that's quite important to me. Another one is the movement of goods as well. So if that can be seamless, the custom, the processes of moving in and out, that is also something we need to improve in order to make the SEZ workable. And also, not just SEZ, generally for the business to happen between Malaysia and Singapore. That is already there. It's just a matter of tweaking and making sure that it is as seamless as possible. And on the talent, I think we've always, in Johor, we always have the benefits and also the bane of being close to Singapore, because you train people and then they leave to Singapore to work over there. There are some sectors where that will continue to happen, I think, in the hotel sector, services sector, that will continue to happen. But at the same time, by having the movement of some of the businesses into Johor, whether by Singapore companies or by multinationals that operate in Singapore and in Malaysia, this will help to address the talent as well, so that it doesn't have to go all the way into
KJ, I think the aspiration of Johor, Dato' Badrul, should be Johor wants to be the place where Singaporeans want to go and live and work, and where people in the Klang Valley want to go and live and work.
I was going to wrap things up with your respective visions and also your one-sentence spiel on what Johor should be. But we have a bit of time, and I'm told that we've not opened to the floor yet during this conference. So are there microphones available down there? There are? I wanted to exercise my role as moderator by opening up to one or two questions, because I think this has been a great panel. We've gone into substantial detail on Iskandar and the opportunities there. And I'd like to ask if there are one or two questions from the floor to either Datuk Badro or Kian Meng about Johor, Singapore, and the Special Economic Zone. Anyone out there? Do I see hands? Yes, I see a hand there. A gentleman with a wonderful batik shirt, please.
Hi, I'm Sheikh. Thanks. Dr. Badrul, this is a bit of a naughty question. Can you tell us a little bit more about the location of the Johor-Singapore Economic Zone? Thank you.
I can't, because I myself do not know the exact location at the moment. We are signing the MOU next week, and then we'll have a bit of time before we have the definitive agreement. So like I said earlier, it can either be the whole of Iskandar, Malaysia as the Special Economic Zone, which means that we need to set some parameters on the types of investment that we will be facilitating and so on. Or it could be one area or two areas, or I don't know, where that is what we call the Special Economic Zone, and whatever benefits will be contained
Belum
within that
ditentukan lagi. Yeah. So what is PNB's viewpoint on where the Special Economic Zone should be located at?
That's what I'm trying to find out.
But maybe I can ask an even naughtier question to Datuk Badrul. We understand that you're not in a position right now to say where it should be, but where would you like it to be?
That's a good question.
I'm not going to answer.
I hope that it can cover the whole of Johor, really, because you cannot ignore the development of places like Segamat, Mersing, the northern parts, the eastern parts. And I think by bringing in this larger ecosystem, by unleashing this kind of energy, we can really be a game changer.
And would
for
it
Malaysia
be uniform incentives throughout the state?
It depends on the sector, and I think, let's say when you're talking about AI and talent development, it would be probably in the urban areas, but there could be incentives for tourism development that could take place in Desaru, Mersing, other places as well.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. We've two more. We'll take two, and then we'll wrap things up. So the two gentlemen who are standing can ask. Yes, sir, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Ishmael Ho from Ho Chin Soon Research. So this is to attention to Dato' Badrul. Some of you may be laughing because my chairman also stood up. So please allow him.
Also your father, right?
Yes, that's
right. Oh, we should have a family quota. I think. Yeah. Anyway, go on.
Okay. Just a quick one. Most of the focus has always been on Iskandar, Malaysia. But as we look at the southern part of Johor, on the eastern side you have Desaru, you also have Pengerang. So one of the questions that always come out is there a plan or in the foreseeable future to actually have a link between Pasir Gudang towards Pengerang side? Because at this juncture, to go to the eastern portion, you have to go all the way up north, Senai Desaru Highway, and that's a big one loop to go down south. So at this juncture, is there a plan of foreseeable future to actually make it easier to go to Pengerang side and also Desaru? So that's my question.
Okay, we'll take both questions at once, and the panelists can wrap things up together.
I didn't know my boss Ishmael Ho has my genes. That when we hear and we see something important of national interest, we have to speak up. Moderator, thank you for opening to the floor. I was in the earlier panel, we talked about high-speed rail and stuff like that. And Dr. Ong, also thank you for being in my broadcast list for so many years. And Dato' Badrul. A very quick one. The Iskandar Malaysia Master Plan almost 20 years ago, during last time, Ho Chin Soon Research was the mapper who defined the territory of Iskandar Malaysia. Now, when Dr. Ong, you said perhaps the whole of Johor, I don't agree. What IRDA should do today, and the government should appoint my boss to sit and tell you guys exactly how it should be done, where it should be placed, and that's his legacy. I already left my legacy for Iskandar, Malaysia. Thank you.
Okay. So the first question is connectivity, in particular from Pasir Gudang to Pengerang. And secondly, Kian Meng, is there a role for external advisors in this SEZ project? Dato' Badrul first.
Right. I answered the second question because it's Mr. Ho Chin Soon. When we planned for Iskandar Malaysia, we had the advantage of being the first of the corridor to do it. So we do not want to be too general or too big, and that's how we come up with that boundary of Iskandar Malaysia as what you see today. And we are thankful to what you've done, and also to all other consultants at the time, to Khazanah as well, who did the planning. That's the difference between Iskandar Malaysia, as you can see, compared to other corridors, where when the second corridor, the East Coast corridor and the Northern corridor came in, there's that pressure of making sure that all the states come in. So you've got, ECR has got four states in the authority, whereas we are able to be more focused, and we look at Iskandar Malaysia in the southern Johor only. And of course, we want the development to go towards all other areas in Johor. And to a certain extent, that has already happened. We have Pengerang development and also Desaru development, redevelopment, also done by Khazanah. So Petronas Khazanah played a big role when we developed the southern part of Johor. And the link is also there, the river, the bridge over river Sungai Johor, that's through the Senai Desaru. So from Senai to Desaru, and onwards towards Pengerang is already there, and we've got allocations for the additional lanes for the road as well. So I think we are getting quite a big support in order to get there and so far.
Kian Meng?
One challenge to Ishmael. Where's Ishmael? Ishmael, my challenge to you, to extend the legacy of your father, rather than just focus on the maps as it is, come up with something like what Singapore has with regards to one map. Replace Google Maps, come up with your own digital maps of Johor Bahru, of Iskandar, and then use that as the commercial basis for other people to use other public APIs to develop new apps, develop new economic sort of like a layering to add value to the entire mapping ecosystem. That's my challenge to you.
To wrap things up, when Pala was standing at that vantage point in Hong Kong in 2004 with this vision, I would say that that vision has achieved some fruition, but it has been a vision delayed and not entirely fulfilled. Now we stand at the cusp of a potential second liftoff using takeoff, using Chin Tong's term, for Iskandar, driven by political and geopolitical change. We cannot underestimate the role of the monarch and his desire to see rapid development during his reign as the Yang di-Pertuan Agong. Secondly, as Kian Meng rightly pointed out, the political transition that will take place in Singapore with Lawrence Wong, a new generation of leader, leading the fourth generation, taking over the government in Singapore, who are acutely aware of the limits of expansion in Singapore. There's only so much that Singapore can do to expand their territory. They need to go beyond what they have, and the easiest, quickest, and most obvious hinterland, of course, is Johor. To end this panel, I'm going to ask both our esteemed panelists about, Kian Meng preempted it just now, what they see Iskandar to be in 10 years' time and what the value proposition is. We've had successes If you go to Johor today, it's far different from what it was in the early 2000s. But we've also had some misses, and you can point to Pinewood Studios, you can point to perhaps Forest City, things that were not really exactly what was envisioned. This is a chance to course correct. This is a chance to latch onto this cusp of opportunity that we have in Singapore as well as Malaysia. Kian Meng first, what is the value proposition of Iskandar and what do you want it to be in 10 years?
The value proposition of Iskandar is to be a more diverse and a more interesting place to work, live and play compared to Shenzhen. And my hope in the near as well as 10-year, five-year time frame would be that perhaps both of us, even though myself and Khairy were out of frontline politics, we can play a role. Perhaps myself at the federal level, Johor at the state level, Khairy, to be able to play a proactive role in providing not just ideas, but be part and parcel of the implementation process to further that vision to what it could be.
So, not keluar sekejap, kembali semula.
Definitely.
Okay. Dato' Badrul, as the boss of Iskandar, what is your final word on the value proposition and your aspirations for the next 5 to 10 years?
When you started earlier, you introduced me as being a Johor civil servant seconded to IRDA. And when we first started Iskandar Malaysia, there's a lot of argument on the federal interest, state interest, who's taking whose power and so on. I think we've gone through all that, and now it's more fused in terms of who's doing what. I think everybody's quite focused in what we're doing. We've learned our lessons in what was successful, what's not so successful. For example, in my opinion, with all the promoted sectors of Iskandar Malaysia, financial services is one that is not doing so well probably because we are close to Singapore, one big financial center. But apart from special economic zone, there's also the announcement on the special financial zone in Forest City. So all this hopefully will bring up Iskandar Malaysia and Johor, especially if it is seen as a national project. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you join me in thanking Dr. Ong Kian Meng and Dato' Badrul for a wonderful session. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, for the exciting discussion. Kindly remain on stage. We would like to welcome Puan Azizah to come on stage to hand over the appreciation token.